We have Jess Mitchell here from Toronto talking about inclusive design and OERs. We'll get started.
Thanks everyone for hanging in there on the Friday afternoon. Just a quick show of hands. Who's heard of the Floe Project? And the Inclusive Design Research Center? Okay, same people. And how many of you consider yourselves designers? Okay, instructional designers. How many are developers? How many of you create content? I know this quiz will end soon. Okay, lots of content creators, awesome. How many of you manage websites or create websites or applications? Okay, good. So I'm Jess Mitchell. I'm from OCAD University in Toronto, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Floe Project, which is a Hewlett-funded project where we're working to have an impact on the inclusivity of OERs. And so one of the first questions you might have is, what is inclusive design? And it's design that's inclusive of the full diversity of just humans, of people. We're all so unique, and our needs are so unique. Our contexts are so unique, and because so much of our world is so digital, we're consuming content wherever we are, many of us right now. And so this is about the inclusivity challenges that come with that and how the Floe Project is trying to address those. So one of the things I want to address up front is, well, that sounds a lot like universal design, and we make a distinction between universal and inclusive design. Universal takes the approach of one size fits all, so I can create this perfect thing, universal design says, and it'll work for everyone. Inclusive design really says that's really, really tough and not going to happen very often, if at all. And so the approach is instead to take something and to try to make one size fit one, so to take the personalization approach. And this is just randomly also, if you're a marathon fan, you know who this is. This is Tatiana McFadden. She just this year won Chicago, London, Boston, and last weekend in New York, which makes her the first person to win 4 major marathons in 1 year, able-bodied or otherwise, and she's just this wonderful, powerful example of she's just powerful. So, so you might ask, well, what does it look like to do the one-size-fits-one? What does personalization look like? I'll show you what it doesn't look like. And this, how many people are familiar with this? Netscape, yeah. So this was back in the days when what was sexy and what was cool was up front and on top, and what was accessible was sort of hidden down below and was a separate site altogether. That's not what we talk about when we're talking about personalization. You might also be familiar with the websites that would have portals. Students click here, parents click here, instructors click here, administrators click here. That's also not what we're talking about when we're talking about personalization. This sort of creates this kind of digital divide. We have so many tools now that enable us to make great content and great interactions for everyone. So in doing that, I want to kind of try to debunk a couple of accessibility myths, because a lot of people think that accessibility is only about special needs, and that the needs would be addressed better if it were one of these sort of separate sites or a separate resource, that it can't be mainstream. And that's just not true with the tools that we have now. A lot of people think that only a few are going to benefit from it. This is what's often referred to as the 80-20 rule. I'm really aiming to satisfy 80% of people and the 20% if I can, but I can't do it all the time, so I'm really going to focus on the 80. And that's a bit of a myth as well, because it's often the case that the 80% benefit from what the 20% need, and vice versa. So does anybody know the top 3 uses for closed captions?
In bed at night with a partner who doesn't want to watch TV.
That's one of them. It's actually not, but that's a good one. Different language.
Sports bars.
Yep, sports bars, gyms, and in bed at night with somebody who's sleeping. So, this is the example of the 80-20. Obviously, captions are beneficial for the deaf and hard of hearing, but the top 3 uses, we all use captions, and we could probably also remember how much. Maybe some of us don't like to watch with captions, some of us now prefer to watch with captions and have changed our mind over time about that. Another myth is that accessibility is costly and complicated, and that actually starting to build some of your content in this inclusive way is going to be really tough. And I'll show you that it's not. You can actually start right away. The other myth is that accessible designs have to be uglier and lack some of the sexy interactions that we all like to play with on websites, and that's also not true. We've got so many great tools, HTML5, JavaScript, we can do a lot with CSS and HTML, and we've got more and more examples of this on the web. So the equivalents are useful to all of us, and I sort of present this as a reason to motivate, because some people could say that one reason to motivate is policy or the risk of litigation, and those are all obviously motivating, but it also becomes motivating if you can shift your perspective and you can start to think of it as something that you yourself benefit from. If you're in a car, we'll talk about that a little bit. So that's what basically brings us to reframing what disability is. In this technological age, disability for us is really a mismatch between the user and the user interface or the technology. In that way, it becomes a design problem. We need to make the match using the design tools and the technological tools we have. So mismatch of, you're no longer in control. And there's so much fear around technology, we have the tools that we can be in control now. So if you're in a car, I had this great image I couldn't use because it wasn't CC BY. But it was this guy in his car, and he had his cell phone up to his ear and a big rubber band around his head. And he was holding on to his steering wheel. I mean, this is a great example of a mismatch. He wants to use his phone, and he doesn't have the features in the phone to be able to use it in that particular situation. And we all experience this mismatch. You mentioned language. If you're in a different culture, there's a mismatch. You don't know the language. You can have a contextual mismatch. You're in a noisy class, and you really have trouble concentrating in that situation. Environmental mismatch. You don't have your earbuds, and you really need them to be able to listen to what you are supposed to be listening to because you're in a library or something. Temporary. You're in the car, and you need to be able to use your phone. Or persistent. You have a vision impairment, or you broke your arm, and so you're going to cast for 3 months. So then this sort of shifts the definition of what accessibility is. If disability is the mismatch, accessibility is the ability to match. And I put this up here because how many people know what a curb cut is? Okay. This is a cool example. A curb cut is at the end of the sidewalk where the sidewalk itself sort of blends into the road. It's mandated by our ADA, but it is also used by anybody who's ever had a stroller. One of my neighbors had one of those grills that you could wheel around. He used it if you are using your luggage later and you've got wheels in your luggage. It's used by in so many other ways. This is an example of one of those adaptations that so many of us benefit from. So as I said, it's a bit of a commitment. This is a screen image of OER Commons. We've worked with them. Open Author is a tool that we've worked with them on and that they have built into OER Commons now. And it gives some ability to mark some of the metadata and to give some information about the resource that's in OER Commons. This is part of the authoring piece. But the point is that you can start from the beginning and it's less costly. One of the concerns is it's costly to make things inclusive. The other thing is to think of it not as a task, but a commitment. This isn't the sort of thing that you check off and you're done, you do it once. It's really a perspective shift. If you understand how to semantically tag your Word docs, you just do it, and it becomes part of your practice, and it just happens to benefit so many people. So in the Floe Project, we've really taken this full ecosystem approach to dealing with inclusivity, because it's not enough to just deal with it on any one point in the kind of pipeline of content being created, content then being shared out, content then being remixed or reused, etc. So what we're doing is coming up with strategies for people who are creating content and sharing those out and trying to demystify some of the difficulties of making things accessible. It is possible. You can start in somewhere and make your content accessible now. The other thing we're doing is we're making tools that transform user interfaces, and this is for websites or applications, and I'll show you an example of that. It's called user interface options or learner options. It's been integrated into OER Commons as well. And then we're creating end-to-end user tools as part of some of the larger projects that we're working on. They're allowing users to declare their needs and preferences and then save those in the cloud and then apply them to devices that they encounter in the world, like bus kiosks or ATMs or all the digital devices, even parking meters now. Right? So the first thing is creating the match. And this is the resource that we've got, the handbook, Inclusive Learning Design Handbook, where we put together some real clear ways to make some of your content more accessible. And this is just a sort of a screen shot of some of the pieces that are there. So we've got the sort of why is it important, what's the approach, but some of the methods for doing it, we can use specific techniques for authoring, for audio, for video, some of the cognitive considerations, which for a lot of people is really confusing, and it's a really tough nut to crack. What we try to do is just give you some guidelines for how to actually have an impact. So some of those strategies are things like just semantic tagging within a Word doc, for instance. If you tag things appropriately, you're creating this rich content that can then be transformed very easily, and we can do some interesting things with it that will adapt it to the needs and preferences of unique users. And then having an awareness about things like text style and size and contrast. How many of you have seen some of those SIG files in people's email with the bright pink and the scripted font? Just to be aware that the font you use may work for you, it may not work for somebody else. Somebody I saw had a presentation where they had a gradient as a background, and at the top it got very light because the contrast, there wasn't enough contrast between the text and the background image itself. There are sites, websites like achecker.ca, ACHECKER.ca. If you plop a URL into that site, it will tell you, based on WCAG 2.0, where your site is measuring up or not. It will give you some instructions for the places where you may not be meeting some of the accessibility standards. Things like thinking in modes. And again, this is really a perspective shift. If you've got all text, you've got to think about is there a way that I can enhance this with something audio or something video? It's easier, I think, to think about video and then to think I've got to have a text transcript with it, or even something as simple as images, and then having an image description of that. And we were just discussing, if you tweet, you've got however many, 140 characters. If you send an Instagram picture, and maybe somebody's in the car and they don't have a chance to look at it, but then you send a couple of, in your tweet, a couple of text descriptions of that. You can imagine just, ways that this is useful to people who want to consume the content. And so thinking in this multimodal way will sort of help you when you're creating content. Think of users who might benefit from an adaptation or another mode. Another thing you can check is there are websites online for checking for the color, for color blindness, if it's for readability. So once you do these great transformations and you've got great content, you've got all these possibilities for transforming the presentation of it. And this is, for those of you who are on the development end of things, this is the separation of content and presentation. If you've done great coding and you've got great content, then we can do these kind of transformations of the presentation of the content. I'll show you here, learner options. Just want to pop out. This is our HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Oops, it didn't work. That didn't work.
I think it's just slow.
No, it's not going to work. Okay, am I? This is what happens, right? As soon as you do a demo. So this is user interface options, also known as learner options. This is integrated into OER Commons. If you go to OER Commons website, the upper right-hand corner says learner options. So if we click on this, you see this is just text, and this is just a website that's integrated learner options into it, which is this HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code package. We show display options, and on the fly, because this content has been tagged properly, we can transform it. So if you're a user who needs a larger text size, either because you're on a very large screen and you want to see it better, or you're trying to show it to other people, or because you have a vision impairment, you can do this. You can change the styling of the text, change the line spacing. We've got some other features in here like color contrast. The table of contents. Somebody mentioned they had a blind user and they are frustrated because their blind users tabbing, trying to get through everything. You give them a table of contents up front, they can jump to that content. Links and buttons, underlining and enhancing those things. And here, just with even in this site, a user can make these declarations of how they want to consume the content, and then the content is transformed on the fly. So that's within a website, and that's a code package that's available now. So those of you who run websites, you can integrate that now. Another tool that we've been working on is an HTML5 video player that has, I'm not going to pop out and show you this, but I can show you afterwards. It has interactive transcripts, it has closed captions integrated. So in the interactive transcript, if you click on any of the text, it'll jump to that part of the video. And obviously it's internationalized as well. So we're not magically creating this content. This content does have to still be created. But if you have the captions and you've got anybody on any machine, this is using HTML5, so regardless of their device, they should be able to use this with ease.
But you have to upload a transcript for it to work.
That's correct. You have to have the transcript. Right. And then I mentioned the end-to-end tools, and this was a Department of Ed funded project where we built this particular tool. And we really work within 3 different projects. The Global Public Inclusive Infrastructure is the GPII. It's a very large project. Cloud for All is an FP7. It's a European-funded project, and we're working on a number of tools there. These are the tools where users can declare their needs and preferences, save them in the cloud, and then using a USB, they can just plug it into a library machine, for instance, and the machine will transform to meet those needs and preferences as best it can based on what's on the machine, doing it on Windows, on Linux, and on Android right now. And this tool is one we built through the Department of Ed grant called the Preferences for Global Access, or Golf PGA. And this is an OER that's about electrons. Sorry. Here we go. So this is about electrons. And what we've built in is the Explorer tool at the bottom here. So when you click this, you pop up a number of options. So one of the problems is, how does a user know what their needs and preferences are, right? What comes first? How do they know what's going to maybe help them learn? And there's a lot of fear around trying something. We know that people don't go into their preferences and change them. They don't go into their system preferences and change them. My father was convinced he would turn the lights out in Cincinnati if he did. There's just a lot of fear around these things. So what we created is a tool that people can go in easily and with low risk, sort of safely interact with these transformations. So with a simple click, you can transform the content on the fly. If you don't know what you want, you can try something new, and it'll generate a new combination of these preferences for you. And then you could save this. You save this to a profile, save it onto a USB. This is up in the cloud, and then go to a library machine or a kiosk in a bus terminal or an airport, and you can transform it so that you can see it. We work with a very tall man from IBM, and he told me that he had a lot of trouble with ATMs because of parallax. He was so tall, and the ATM was fixed in one position that he'd really have to crouch down to get the proper contrast. And it's those sorts of transformations that we can do on the fly and very easily now. So the next steps for us are to continue to teach these skills because they are teachable and they are usable, and you can start to make your content more accessible now. And I'm happy to dive into any of the Inclusive Learning Design Handbook. We have another project called Alternativa e-Access, which is in the Spanish-speaking world. It's for training modules in Spanish, but it's also English language as well. But it's meant to train instructors and teachers in how to make their content more inclusive, more accessible. We're going to be working on automatically generating metadata. So if you upload a video, for instance, into WordPress or some other authoring environment, we can scrape what capabilities that video has and generate the metadata for you. Where the metadata hasn't been generated, we can give you an interface that will allow you to add it, just like we have in OER Commons in OpenAuthor. And then we're working on this rating, resources, and improvement loop. So once you've declared your needs and preferences and say you need English captions for all the videos you consume, if you get an English caption video and the captions are bad, you can rate it and get it into an improvement feedback loop where somebody will come along and improve that and then contribute it back so other people can use it. And more tools as well. I mentioned within the Cloud for All project, we're working on the tools for users to declare their preferences, and I can show you some of those if you want as well. So we're a really lovely bunch. We like to collaborate and we like to talk, and we're very open. All of our materials are open. If it's code, it's in Git, and it's ECL2 or BSD. If it's not code, it's all CC BY. So all of our designs, I'll say it again, all of our designs, all of our documentation, everything we do is open for everyone. So these are some of our links. This is our Twitter feed. This is our wiki where all of our work happens. You can see it the day it happens, and then our GitHub site as well. And this graph sort of shows the sort of the breadth of projects that we're working on. So you see Floe here, the IDRC, that's the research group that I'm with at OCAD University. We've got Alternative e-Access that I mentioned. This is Cloud for All and Prosperity for All, which are the FP7s in Europe. Access for All within Ontario, and the Access for All standard, of course. Preferences for Global Access was the Department of Ed grant, and that was our working with OER Commons. And this is Adaptiva, another one of the grants that's related to the alternative. It's just the whole GPI line.
Can you increase the font size?
I can't read it.
Yeah, no, the contrast is bad too, isn't it? Not good fun. So questions, that was a lot. So questions.
Good one.
Yeah, very cool. I want it.
Yeah? Great. We love to hear stories too about the work that you're doing. It was great to hear, just to pick on you, you have a student you said that was blind, and it's the perspective shift. And I think it's just such an eye-opener from both directions, and it's really exciting to think about ways to make OERs available to your students. Yeah, I get a question.
What do you recommend for math?
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's what I do.
Come on, you know the answer to that. Math is hard. We're working on math with some people. Within the Preferences for Global Access project, we outlined some of the areas that are the areas that need the most attention for the Department of Ed, and one of them was math. There are some math solutions out there that are getting creative and innovative and are helping in some ways. And I think that it's a really tough nut to crack. We've been working with folks like FET on some of their simulations, which are math and physics heavy. And we've been transforming them into SVG and into HTML5. They've got a lot of Java and a lot of Flash-based stuff. So that's kind of the first step toward math, but we haven't solved math. I don't think anybody's solved math yet.
You sort of incidentally answered my other question, which is about simulations. So
Yeah.
just working on some accessible simulations.
Yeah, so FET's really interested in getting their simulations, which are they're really cool stuff. There was one on displacement, where you drop heavy things into a puddle of water and the water rises up. And we actually did a kind of a cool transformation of one of the FET tools. Let me see if I can find
While
it
you're
here.
searching for that, I wanted to say, the Diagram Center, they're based, where are they based? Somebody help me. They work with Benetech and WGBH. They do a lot of accessibility stuff. They have been doing a lot around math, so you should check out the Diagram Center.
The diagrams.
They're based at a university back east. Sorry not to be more specific. And they do free webinars, and they did one about 6 months ago on math.
I can't even see what I'm typing. This is horrible. This is going to take me a second, but we've got this wonderful cats. That's what I want to show you. We took a FET simulation, which was about balance, and we tried to make. Oops. Oh, it's over here. That was confusing. This is an older version, but we tried to make some interactions for a use case that we created. Again, open Creative Commons license. It's a persona or a use case around a hypothetical user. Her name is Danny, and she had traumatic brain injury at age 6. So we were trying to play around with some of the interactions that she might be able to interact with to choose preferences. And these are some of the things. I can show you the cats with the FET example a little later. Yeah.
Just wondering if you've heard of APIP is a new IMS standard for like exchanging quizzes with accessibility data.
Yeah.
That's just a related project that you might be
Yeah, we've been working on quizzes and on assessments and testing as well, and connecting with data. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, please see me if you want to see any of this stuff up close and get some URLs. And this is up on SlideShare as well. I don't yet know how to link it to the OER, the OpenEd page, but I'll figure that out.